Welcome to From Waterloo to the Alamo, a podcast about everything from real estate to real life. I'm your host, Traci Wilson. I am so excited to have Bron Hager and Philip Speer. We're excited to talk to him and Bron today about Comedor, Garage Bar, and we really hope you enjoy the show. Well, we all know that Austin has been primarily known for Tex-Mex, barbecue restaurants, food trucks, because it's such an eclectic town. However, we all know too that the dining scene has changed quite a bit. We have gotten quite a few upscale restaurants, and one of the biggest things that I wanted to talk about today was clearly, Comedor, which is an award-winning restaurant that I believe just celebrated about 5 years of being open. And then Garage Bar, which just celebrated 10-year anniversary as well this weekend. So I kind of want to start out with you, Bron. I've known you a really long time. We kind of grew up together, and you've always been very, very good at connecting people from all different backgrounds, right? Whether it be athletes, top chefs, socialites, entrepreneurs. And through that, you've been able to create some incredible business ventures like Garage Bar. So I think one of the things people probably want to know is how did that kind of all come about? How did you get the idea for Garage Bar and kind of get it going, 10 years ago?
Well, which version of the story do you want? Because I think there's quite a few different versions, but in all seriousness, I think it started way before myself, and I can't give myself credit for, I played a very small role. We had a large community of contributors to the project. But early on, it was two of my childhood friends, William Ball and Connor Oman. We all grew up together in Burton Creek West and have had a long-standing friendship and history. William and I have played football together at Westlake High School, and we were able to keep our relationship going through thick and thin, through young and old. And we had this crazy idea. The landlord, William's dad at the time, Bill Ball, had this vacant office space that he couldn't quite figure out what to do with it. He says that he always wanted to put a bar there, and I'm sure that was the case. But I think the reality is it took William and Connor and I getting together at the Brown building and saying, hey, we're gonna put this together, and we're gonna open a bar. I was 23 years old. I didn't know what I was doing, but I knew that we didn't have $15 cocktails. I knew that there was a market for craft cocktails. I was fortunate enough to travel all over the world at a young age, and I was clearly a little early on that trend. We also had a lot of amazing people like Mickey Spencer on the east side and Chauncey James, who were total visionaries and people that Connor and I gravitated towards and spent a lot of time with, trying to convince them to come work on a project with us in the business district of Austin. And one of the greatest things that happened to me on this trip, and I was going down to baggage claim, and I was looking at the big LED screens, and the sign said, welcome to the heart of Austin, or welcome to the heart of Texas. And if Austin is the heart of Texas, then I think that makes Fifth and Colorado the heart of Austin.
Oh, that's very cool. That's so cool. And so what was the scene around Garage Bar then? Because I'm trying to remember, because I remember going there, which 10 years, I can't believe it's been that long. And I don't really remember what it was like 10 years ago. You know what I mean? What
10 years
the food and bar scene looked like.
I mean, we've actually been open for longer than 10 years, but the first year we were in business, we operated illegally without a certificate of occupancy, and I don't recommend anyone doing that. But at the time, we thought, hey, there's no late night hours places. Let's try to open this place, get some traction, get our friends in, and try to do something special and unique. We did that, and then we finally got all of our business affairs in order, and we're able to actually relaunch the project. And during South by Southwest a decade ago, and I'll never forget, the first couple contracts we were able to sign, whether it was Dropbox or Under Armour. And there's just so many great memories of the early days at Garage. And I'll never forget the day that, a Larry McGuire walked in or a Paul Key walked in, or all of these really influential people that all of us looked up to come see what the hell they were doing we were doing at Fifth in Colorado. And it was just such a special time and energy that it's hard to put into words now because the area has changed so much. It's not the same place, but it is. It's a time capsule. It's trapped in time. It's a bar. It's simple. It's easy to understand. It's easy to manage. And we have had great bar proprietors. And I cannot take, credit for that. We had Paul Finn, who was with us for, I think, almost 8 years, who flew back in from North Carolina to join us. And now we have Chris Simpson, who's an unbelievable manager. And we have a larger parent company that, takes care of everything. But it's hard to believe that, we got a chance. We had an older gentleman that said, "Hey boys, I'm giving you the keys to the castle. Go make something happen." So it's fun to look back on.
Yeah. Well, and I feel like the location itself has made it super unique. Grant that it's in a garage. But do you feel like the craft cocktail world in Austin back then, I don't really feel like there really was a true craft cocktail bar. And I love that, garage is very simple, but you also have a very unique cocktail experience.
Yeah, we were hell bent on the experience, and we always are. We always talk about sense of place and making sure that the entry sequence is, romantic and special. And, you're not quite sure what you're going to do when you turn that corner. People still today don't even know how to enter garage. I see people still to this day run into the glass door that's not the entry sequence to get into the actual bar. And I think that was all very intentional. And but back to your first question, I've got to give a lot of credit to Scranton Tui at Whistler's. He was really early on. I look at Billy Knockman and what he did at Bar Illegal early on, who has now had a super successful career with Cricket Shirts. There wasn't a lot, but it was Eastside Showroom, Chauncey James, Mickey Spencer. Philip might have some more insight on other cocktail players at the time, but we were definitely very early on.
Yeah.
I think really the only other notable one at that time was Bill Norris and Midnight Cowboy. And
that's right.
Can't
forget Midnight Cowboy.
Yeah, absolutely.
So this weekend was special, right? Y'all just celebrated 10 years.
Very.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about how this weekend kind of was full circle for you.
Full circle for me, just being all together. We've all been through so much as friends and family and a team. And it's just hard to believe the place is still there. And it's in the best shape I've ever seen it in. And it's so well taken care of. And the brand and energy and spirit and philosophy and all the things that we value and preach and talk to each other about on a daily basis, you can feel it. The guest experience is there, and you just feel grateful. It was the project that taught me how to promote. It was the project that taught me how to sell. It was the project that taught me that details matter. All things that now I take into all my business ventures and everything that I do, and it all started at a garage.
Yeah, that's so cool. Well, you are from Austin, born and raised, and I know you love the city. You are probably one of the best people to ask about hidden hotspots, secret gems of places to go eat and try. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your new media brand that you're trying to launch called Bron Appetit? I'd love to hear a little more about it.
I think it's a multiple part project that's going to take many years to develop. But right now it's essentially just a content flywheel trying to capture mind share of crypto native audiences. So I spend a lot of time on Twitter, and I spend a lot of time trying to build an audience to share food stories that don't necessarily get picked up or ones that I think are really interesting. And then the second part is I'm in development on a docuseries that will be a platform for resilient hospitality leaders and telling their stories.
That is so cool. So Bron Appetit, tell me a little bit about the play on words there. It's very cute. Because your name is Bron, which is very unique, but
I can't take credit for the name. My sister-in-law coined the term. I have a lot of nicknames. My friends call me all kinds of things. Bron Sears is another one. And I always have had an affinity for Bon Appetit, and Bon Appetit sounded like, hey, it sounds like a good catchy thing. So
it is.
Well, we went with it.
I love it. I love it. Well, Philip, let's kind of shift gears to you. So you have been a chef since the 90s. Why don't you tell us a little bit how the landscape in the culinary world has changed since you first started?
Sure. It's funny how small of a town Austin really truly is, and all the serendipity throughout the story that he tells. That I think back onto the beginning of my culinary career and just my time in Austin in general. I moved here in 93. In 99, I had multiple jobs in those years in the culinary world, but in 99, I opened Jean-Luc's Bistro, reopened rather, Jean-Luc's Bistro with Sean Circule. And across the street, little did I know that not only the landlord in the building we're in, but the person redeveloping the Brown building across the street was Bill Ball, who I then went on to be a business partner with 25 years later.
Wow.
Also, a funny part of that story is for about a decade, the Star Building, or it's actually not called the Star Building, we call it the Star Building, where Garage is, and it's just now adjacent to Comedor. The garage on the bottom was a skateboarding spot that we had created, and we actually put homemade ramps in the bottom of that parking garage. So I don't know if you remember, but the parking garage, the double helix, was a really fun parking garage to skate down. And then when you get to the bottom part, there's this double-edged curb that went all the way down the garage into this like ice rink smooth floor. So we'd like slide down that curb and then go and skateboard all through there for years. We had props in there. We call them props. We had skateboard props in there for years, and we would skate there. And little did I know, 22 years later, we would be building a restaurant on that same spot.
That's incredible.
Yeah, it's really interesting. So yeah, I've been in Austin for about 30 years. Been a chef for most of those years. You asked about Austin 10 years ago. That is about the time I had the exit from the group that I was a part of for the 10 years previous to that, which is probably where I got the majority up until this point, majority of the recognition of my career. And that was with High Hospitality. And I was first the executive pastry chef. And then, first I was the pastry chef of Uchi, the executive pastry chef for Uchi restaurants, and then the culinary director for the company. I joined Uchi 2 years in, where I worked with Paul Key, who you mentioned a minute ago. We then opened Uchi-Co, and then went on to open Uchi Houston, build out Uchi Dallas, some other concepts, and St. Philip ultimately.
St. Philip is where I fell in love with you, by the way.
St. Philip, yeah. So, and I didn't know this. I didn't know this till years later. As the crew would come into St. Philip, that's also a funny story how we actually ended up all connecting through that pathway.
Well, that's what I was going to ask next, kind of the connection, because y'all mentioned quite a few of the same names.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I had a major life change, which I'm sure we'll touch on at some point, because it's a very big part of my story. Through that major life change, I changed how I was doing the job. And ultimately, I opened a restaurant called Bonamy. That restaurant unfortunately only lasted about a year. Well, not unfortunately, because it led to other things. But while I was doing Bonamy, I had a couple men come in, and it was at that time, Bron wasn't there, but it was William and Connor come in to Bonamy and approach me about potentially working on a project together. At that time, it was My Name is Joe, and it was a coffee company that William created to create a space for possibly people who were, coming in out of rehab from drug and alcohol addiction, and or looking for some sort of support there. Also, a percentage of the profits we made from the coffee company went to a rehab center. But when wanting to bring me into that project, there was also an idea that we were going to start doing food at Garage. So these gentlemen approached me, and funny enough, through St. Philip, had figured out somehow to go to the skateboard shop in town, which is No Comply, which is another amazing local brand in Austin that has celebrated their 15 years of success here. So many amazing companies and brands that were built in Austin, which is one of the reasons I continue to stay in Austin. But through the skate shop, they went in there and they said, "Hey, do you know this guy, Philip Speer?" And the owner of the skate shop, Elias, was like, "Yeah, I know Philip." Little did I know that Connor's dad would buy sneakers there all the time, and you guys would buy shoes there too. Yeah. And they tracked me down to Bonamy, asked me if I'd do this project, and it all worked out. And it happened to be that Bonamy wasn't working, and I was able to not only come on and do the food at Garage and help build My Name is Joe, the brand and the company, but then ultimately join the product of Comedor, which was already in process. So and continue to grow it and evolve it into what it is today, from just past inception, but and execution. So I joined the project in June of 18, or the Comedor project. I agreed to join that project, although I had done some consulting work on building out the kitchen and kind of imagining the culinary offering. But in May or June of 18, I fully committed to the project and helped build the building.
And help build it all up. So tell me, from before Comedor kind of became in between, you had some struggles, right? The kind of a hard road. Why don't you tell us a little bit about how that looked and kind of how you felt like it's led you to create such a different culture and experience in Comedor? Because I know you really are trying to change the hospitality industry, right? The way that, people who are actually working at the restaurants, kind of the whole culture of it. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. I feel like trying to change the hospitality industry is a whole lot more to bite off than what I bite off
reinvent.
Every day.
Yeah.
So
however you
I actually like to use the term shift.
Yeah. Okay.
For multiple reasons. It's a play on words too, because we work in shifts. Right?
Oh, that's cute. Yeah.
So shift to post-shift culture. We have post-shift gatherings, pre-shift gatherings. The words used a lot in our business. So in the hospitality business, there is a traditional culture of work hard, play hard, which is not uncommon for many fields. However, with restaurants, since we do keep a little bit different hours, often when we build community, the only opportunity to do so is after work, or at least that's what we thought for a long time. Turns out there are actually a lot of hours in the day, but the hours in the day or night that we would connect would be post shift, often at a bar. Mostly at a bar, and there's
Which
a lot.
I did a lot of when I was a young man.
Right. There's a lot of justification of like, this is all we have to do because we work later. This is our happy hour, and so that's a lot of the kind of language around that. But why can't we shift that post shift culture and start connecting at different times of the day? So that's how ultimately the Comedor Run Club was born. But outside of the Comedor Run Club, actually I left here from just chairing a Ben's Friends meeting, which is a coalition of sober food and beverage professionals, where Comedor is the Austin chair place for that. So we have meetings there weekly. And I've found that there's all sorts of things you can do during the day before work that don't involve drinking. So my goal is to create spaces in the restaurant business, not only in our restaurant, but all of our community and beyond now, where you can connect and build that same camaraderie that you look for, because ultimately restaurants it's a people business. Right. And it's a living, breathing organism. And it's important to build those connections and to connect with people, because we are people. So we just want to create new spaces for that connection. And I think I've seen in my restaurant, and I've seen it in other restaurants as well, is the whole culture of the staff changes, thus creating a much more welcoming, inclusive environment for any of the guests that come in. Yeah. And that's super important to us when we have an understanding of how and why each other are supposed to be there and want to be there. It is a much more welcoming experience for anybody that walks in our door, no matter why they're walking in. Right, for sure. So Ben's Friends, that's what you were kind of touching on, right? So why don't you tell us, because it's gotten quite a bit of recognition. Yeah, so tell us a little more about that. Ben's Friends is a nonprofit based in Charleston that's been operating for about 7 years. As I said, it's a coalition of sober food and beverage professionals co-founded by Mickey Basks and Steve Palmer. Steve Palmer is a very, very successful restaurateur who has 27 restaurants and multiple hotels along the middle and southeast coast. And Mickey Bask is a lifelong restaurant professional. They had a friend who committed a friend that committed suicide after a long battle with drug and alcohol addiction. Thus, his name is Ben. Thus, forming the group Ben's Friends, which was basically just a network of people who worked in the restaurant business who wanted to find sobriety or a different way to live their lives. Pre-pandemic, there were meetings available in specific cities only, and they started in Charleston and then grew in the cities around that area. So Raleigh, Charlotte, Nashville, and some of those places. Eventually, a couple years in, they branched out to Indianapolis and then Portland and Seattle. I'd kind of been knocking on the door of Ben's Friends for a while. They're a very small nonprofit, so never really received any response. But eventually I connected with another chef chef and runner who was leading meetings in Portland. And then he fast tracked the meetings happening within weeks. We had an Austin chapter. Now I am a chairperson on the nonprofit, as well as the Austin chair.
So how often, what's a monthly look into Ben's Friends in the Austin chapter? Like, do you meet weekly?
We meet every Monday at 11 a.m. in person at Comedor. There are 14 Zoom accessible meetings. So anybody in the world can join them. And we have people internationally who join us. Most of them are in US, but all over. I chair the Austin meeting, and I also chair a Saturday national meeting. Again, all Zoom accessible. And of those online meetings outside of there's another handful of meetings that are in person only. So there are meetings available to everyone all the time, multiple times a day.
Okay, that's awesome. That's great. And I think one of the things that is so unique is that no one else is really doing that here in Austin, which is what I think makes you so special. And not only is it that it's being associated with Comedor, which is clearly very unique in and of itself. I will say that I'm not very adventurous when it comes to eating food, but I branched out when I ate at y'all's restaurant, and I tried the bone marrow tacos, which if anybody was to tell me to do that, I think I would normally not, but they were fantastic. Yeah. So I am very curious about how did you curate all the recipes? Because it's so unique and it's so different. Because I know it's a very, authentic. It's very authentic dishes. So I'm curious about what was the process in curating those recipes?
Yeah, absolutely. Lots of inspiration, lots of people coming together and creating food together. And then through that process of people's backgrounds and experiences, creating those dishes, then the process of us tasting them and deciding that these are great dishes, they belong on the menu. You say that you understand that it's very authentic. What I want to say is the techniques and flavors are very authentic and representative of Mexican cuisine. We are very creative and do less traditional takes on some of those authentic flavors and techniques. And we also use products that are the majority, when possible, I'd say about 80% of the items that come in the door that we get to prepare and that you get to ultimately eat are sourced within 100 miles of our front door. So that's very, very important to us. So we may have something that you can't get anywhere else, as far as a piece of produce or a protein or a fish goes. With the fish, obviously, it's a little bit more than 100 miles because we draw from the Gulf, and in that way, you're not gonna get this like super traditional, super authentic dish that you might get in Mexico because it's different ingredients, it's different products, it's grown differently, it tastes different, but rooted in the soul and the tradition and the techniques. And it takes a lot of people to create that. It takes a lot of collaboration. It takes a lot of openness. It takes a lot of tasting, which I'm grateful and happy to do. Something like the bone marrow tacos was created upon opening. 4 chefs had input on that. Wow. There were multiple iterations of that. till it finally hit the menu, and it's something that's become a staple of ours. And so it's one of those dishes that you can't say this chef created that and documented the recipe and now we do it. It's one of those dishes that a bunch of minds and palates came together and created something really delicious that now has become our most popular dish, right next to the chocolate tamal.
Yeah.
Which the first time I had a bite of that chocolate tamal, I feel like my eyes rolled back in the back of my head. I mean, the way that he can pair things and the team pairs ingredients together is and you can put them up against anyone in the country. I still think about the chicken liver mousse and churro and beets. Whoever thought to put that together? I mean, still looking for and searching for a dish of that sophistication.
It's funny. Rick Rubin recently said that if you create something that everybody likes, you haven't given it everything you have, because true creativity is polarizing, and half the people are going to love it, half people are going to hate it.
So interesting.
I have 3 or 4 dishes in over the span of my career where that comes to me, that point of view that he said, and I agree with it mostly. Although I have created some things or have eaten things that have been created by others that I know everyone likes, but I do agree with that artistic point of view. So the chicken liver mousse and churro is definitely one of them. That was my creation, and that is something that was very polarizing in our restaurant. I don't think you would have enjoyed it.
It's probably all the words.
Just from what I hear,
all the words involved in that.
I'm a very adventurous eater.
But the people who did love it loved it.
Yeah.
And the people who did not understand it never ordered it again. And there's another one, and it was a dish that I created at Uchiko called the tobacco cream. That comes to mind when I hear that point of view. And
I was
it's
a
like,
big fan of that one.
yeah,
as well.
it's like you either hated it or you loved it. And the ones who loved it were like, "This is genius!" Like, and the ones who didn't were like, "What is this? This is insane."
The name, just the name in it of itself.
But I do truly believe that, creation or artistic creation is interesting, especially in a restaurant. I think it's really interesting to create. I think anything created is art. It's interesting to create and then to mass produce at a high volume for a long time. Right. So you may create a dish. And so not only do you need to reproduce that dish as consistently as possible for X amount of time, you need to train people how to do so. You need to train people how to present it. You need to somewhat train people how to eat it, which is something we don't want to teach people things when they come in the restaurant. We want people to enjoy themselves. But there's all of these pieces.
Although that's not a bad idea. Maybe we should pre-train people to eat before they
Yeah.
come to a restaurant.
I know, right? That's true. You've got to make sure that, a carrot from a different patch on a different day of the year tastes different every time it comes in the back door. That's what organic foods do. So it's interesting to create something and then put it out night after night, dish after dish, sometimes thousands of them a week, looking for that same consistency, and it being an artistic creation that multiple people came up with, having a real personality to it. It's something that's super, super difficult to recreate, and to do so well. And I think that's where a lot of restaurants kind of fall apart.
Yeah.
Is, sometimes you have a really creative, artistic mind, and sometimes you have a really operational, logistical mind. And you often need those to work together. There's not many people who can possess both of those, but you need those to work together to have a successful, consistent restaurant that is rooted in creativity and delicious, amazing flavors.
Well, and even just the second you walk in to Comedor, it's the vibe of it is just so it's awesome. I mean, the patio is fantastic. Y'all really did a good job with, the way y'all designed the space.
Yeah, absolutely.
But, I've always wondered, I mean, it's so curious when people like, yourselves are thinking about opening a restaurant, down from, what type of food it's going to be to how it's going to look and where it's going to be. The success of a restaurant, what do you think it is based on? Is it the location? Is it the type of food? Is it the vibe of the restaurant? I mean, I've always wondered why some restaurants that have fantastic foods, which, I mean, Bron, you probably know great little hidden gems throughout Austin that are not the prettiest places in the world, maybe not in the right locations or kind of far out off the beaten path, but they do really well. So what do you think? I mean, it could be a combination of all of it, but I've always wondered, is it the location? Is it the the chef? Is it the food?
I think if I had a definitive answer to that question, I'd probably be very wealthy.
Yeah.
Which I'm not.
Yeah.
It's so organic and it's so hard to pinpoint because ultimately at the end of the day, it's how the person feels when they leave the restaurant.
Yeah.
So because you don't have a successful restaurant if people don't come back. And the experience might be with a world-class Michelin starred, which isn't a real thing, by the way, a world-class James Beard Award-winning, Michelin-recognized chef that creates the most amazing, most beautiful dishes for 12 people a day. Or it could be Matt's El Rancho, right? Which serves 700 people a day for the last 49 years or however, right? Yeah. Again, at the end of the day, it's how you feel when you leave. Did you have an experience? Did that experience check all the boxes that you needed it to check?
Yeah.
And it's different at different times. You know, it's almost an impossible answer,
right?
Because it's often magic in a bottle. Sometimes it's timing. Sometimes it is location. But I can tell you can be I have seen restaurants in what are the best locations in the city with parking, with visibility, with room, and fail.
Air conditioning.
I mean, it's so many things. I mean, you look at, you'd mentioned Larry McGuire earlier. You look at that restaurant group, MML, and they've created an empire right here in Austin, and through just hitting all of those details just right and creating an experience where people want to go back.
Right.
They also have a very specific clientele. And you go to other restaurant groups and you see success. You look at Larry Foles and they have a very specific clientele and people who go back to those restaurants. And all of those restaurants do the things they do really well, right? But they fall in different parts of the spectrum on the details, the vibe, the ambiance, the food, the ingredients. They're all different.
Yeah.
And some may say this is the best tasting thing I've ever had, and someone will tell you the complete opposite. And it's just such a subjective.
It's so subjective.
Yeah. I can see that.
And so it's you have to hit all the parts, right? When Comedor was built, it was important to all of us that not so much location, but the building, the ambiance, the service, the culinary, yes, but the beverage, the music, the lighting, the design, every piece, every material in that building was meticulously gone over and picked out by multiple people. And every piece of that has gotten us up to this 5 years at this point. And remember, we opened 11 months before we shut down for the pandemic. That was
right after you won Restaurant of the Year.
Gosh,
got lost. It really did get lost.
Got lost.
And then not only did we have to shut down 11 months after opening, I mean, right when we reopened, we dealt with some other drama and scandal that also kind of put a setback on us. And that is just a testament 5 years later, and our actual anniversary is tomorrow. April 16th, 2019 is our open date. And that is just a testament to how right we did get it. And there has been adversity, and we have pushed through that. And it's not only how right the building and ambiance and service and lighting and music and food and beverage are, but it's also how the people feel when they come in the door. And it's a culmination of those things. It's the culture of the people working there. It's all of it.
I think you just touched on something so true, though. It's the resiliency. It's can you get up the next day and go back to war? Because it's like a playbill. It's like you're producing theater every single day. And while the cast of characters might shift or change, the culture has to stay intact. And
you need someone who can lead that every day.
You have to have a conductor. You have to have a producer. You have to have a director. You have to have somebody that has experience and can help lead the entire team to success every single day.
Yeah. And it's hard. And it's like, the margins on a restaurant, and this is well-known information, the margins on the restaurant business are very hard. And there's so many uncontrollable costs that are just changing so much over these last couple of years. And so just keeping up with that, having to say, okay, we need to change something immediately, because if we do not, this margin is going to go from this amount to this amount, and that will sink someone quickly.
Right.
Also have a lot of gratitude that we have so many people, amazing people who really want to see the concept succeed involved in the project, that when it is time to make those changes or to bring in a little bit more resource to make it happen, that's available.
Yeah.
And here we are 5 years later, and here Garage is 10 years later. And, I jokingly said this today in my Ben's Friends meeting, because we were talking about milestones, because that's something that you celebrate, and some people celebrate in sobriety as well. The milestone for a restaurant or a hospitality business or a bar, I mean, it's like dog years, right?
Right.
Which isn't a real thing.
We can debate that another time, but yeah.
But it's 5 years for a restaurant, 10 years for a hidden bar. It's incredible.
We've never done any marketing. It's all been word of mouth.
Oh yeah.
Ever, yeah. It's incredible. And I am so proud of the people who are involved. I'm proud of myself and my involvement in that. But there's so many other people who have really, as you said, the visionaries and the long-term commitment to making sure the business
worked on that project. You had Evan Voiles create a sign of Neon Jungle. You've got Ryan and Caleb from Land, who are like the most prolific branders, universally accepted and known at this point. So many creative, amazing humans.
Like you said, Mickey Spencer
came together. A developer like Bill Ball, who's been sitting on that property for a very long time.
McKinney and York Architecture.
McKinney and York. There's so many people that deserve to be celebrated.
Litmus, Drophouse, and these are all Austin brands. And yes, Olsen Kundig, amazing group, and Tom himself and Bob from the Olsen Kundig firm came and really had oversight on the design and the architectural design and plans. But McKinney York going into Bob and coming, and Al York and Heather, and executing that building. I mean, all of the Austin people who came together to build this, it really shows the authenticity of what we did. And I think that is another really important key part to any business, but really in the hospitality business, which is such a person business, is you have to have the authenticity, because people see through the shit.
Right.
Right. And if they don't feel connected to that because of any kind of inauthenticity, you don't have any life. You don't have lifespan.
Right.
I think that's very
Wasn't
important.
the complexity of building Comedor similar to building a skyscraper? I heard some crazy stat about like the amount of complexity that went into building that infrastructure is the same amount of attention to detail that goes into building a 50-story or a 10-story or a 30-story building. I think that what the achievement from an engineering and construction and all, like you said, all of the brilliant people that touched that piece and had great leadership with Philip and William and the entire team. I mean, it's just to look back on 5 years for this project, for you guys and for the team, it just fills my heart with so much joy, because there were so many times and so many no's. There were so many people that said, Fifth in Colorado is never going to work. Why would anyone put a restaurant at Fifth in Colorado? You got Manuel's. I'll never forget sitting down with a gentleman that we were looking to raise some capital from, and somebody that I respect tremendously. And he said, that's never going to work. The roads go the wrong way. Lo and behold, the roads go both ways now on Fifth in Colorado.
It's true.
And Manuel's, I haven't had a bite there in a really long time, but like, we had a lot of opposition of people saying, you guys don't know what you're doing. That's never going to work. And so to sit here and to see all the work of all the amazing people that show up every day, the resiliency is so important. It's just part of the message, and the toughness and the grit you have to have in order to be successful in this space.
Yeah.
Sure. Well, and I was actually one of those doubters on the location.
He's going to fall on the sword right now and admit it.
I think William and Connor would tell you I like chuckled like audibly when they told me the location that was going to be downtown. I'm like, I would never do a restaurant downtown. Which was funny because I was in the middle of opening a restaurant in what I thought was the most perfect location, and it failed less than a year later.
So I guess we kind of have our answer to the question. It's got to be a perfect storm.
It's a mixed bag and a perfect storm. And a lot of serendipity. Yeah. A lot of the things that have happened along the way, I can't explain. I really can't.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm Brandon Sparks with Nautilus Lending. We're a full-service mortgage lender and brokerage based right here in Austin, Texas, but serving not just Texas, Florida, and Tennessee as well. One of the things we're really, really good at is creative financing. And it doesn't matter whether you're a first-time home buyer or a seasoned investor. We have loan programs to facilitate everything legally possible. You can find out more about us at www.nautilus-lending.com. That's www.nautilus-lending.com.
Yeah. Well, and I will say this, you made a good point about how if you create a dish, half the people are going to like it, half the people aren't. But I think what y'all did with Comedor, which is very unique, is people like myself who I don't consider myself a foodie, like yourself,
Like
Bron
Appetit.
Like Bron Appetit. Like I like a lot of things. I'm pretty easygoing when it comes to food. But when you go to Comedor, you see the menu, you eat the food, you're in the restaurant. It is very much an experience, and it's something you don't forget. And I think for every single person, I think that is 100% of the people will leave with that, with, wow, this is very memorable. And even to tie in like Garage Bar, I mean, I remember it regardless of even, because I know you, but it is so unique and the cocktails are so unique and everything about it was so unique that, again, you create an experience. So when people leave, it's,
you want to go back to details for a second? I'm going to correct you on something. It's just garage.
Oh, it's just garage.
And so many people call it the garage bar or the garage, but that goes back to the level of detail. It's very intentional. It's just garage.
Well, and it's funny because I know it's called garage, but I just call it, let's go to Garage Bar. Or everyone just kind of coins it. I made my own name for you. I'm sorry.
But that's good. It just goes back to details. It's intentional. And Connor and William would say the same thing. It's like every single thing matters. Like,
right.
There's no stone that's unturned. Like, we were laughing. We had this big party with an amazing musician from Austin, Tamika Jones. And we did a nice private event for our friends and family. And we were laughing because Bill, I remember when we were first, looking at materials and details, he was building these stools that weighed 50 pounds and putting all this metal weight into the legs. And I'm like, man, women aren't going to ever be able to move these. He's like, well, they're built well and they'll last forever. And he's right. And it's like 10 years later, it's like, don't ever underestimate the savviness and sophistication of the older generation because they have a lot to teach you as well.
Always. No, for sure. So I think one of the things that I would be curious, Philip, is you're passionate about the recovery community, especially with starting the chapter with Ben's friends here and really, really investing in that. Have you ever had a dream to open up some sort of recovery retreat here in Austin? Because there's, so many beautiful places that have, either ranches that have a beautiful pond and all the things that you could probably create a really amazing place for. Has that ever been kind of in the cards for you, or are you going to kind of stick to the restaurant?
Yeah, I mean, my wife and I absolutely have a dream of doing for a couple years ago, we were able to do something we called farm school, which we brought chefs and restaurateurs into a farm plot and taught them how to farm for their restaurant. And granted, it was a small farm plot, so they weren't growing all the food for the restaurant, but maybe they would grow enough food for a dish that they ran for a season or something of the sort. And in doing so, we just thought about how amazing it would be to create a working farm and restaurant and retreat center for chefs, restaurateurs, managers, whatever part of whatever branch of the restaurant you're in, and come and have this like kind of wellness break that is so often needed. The first vacation I ever had was rehab. I mean, and that was the only time I'd ever taken off a amount of time where I had no choice but to turn off and actually focus on me. And granted, it wasn't the best case scenario that got me there. But while I was there, it really made me realize like we are missing, or I as a restaurant professional, the way I was doing restaurants, which was the way many of my peers were doing restaurants, missing out on so much of life. And how awesome would it be to create a place where you can go, you can farm, you can eat, you can cook, you can relax, you can maybe learn how to run or do yoga or meditate or breathe, breath work, or whatever it may be, whatever occurs and resonates with you. And why not have a space where you can go and explore that and figure that out? So absolutely have that dream.
And you would want to do it here in Austin?
I'd want to do it in Central Texas, absolutely. Probably right outside of Austin, but we looked at I don't think it's there would be some things holding us back currently from being a reality. Most of it capital, but we've imagined it in places like Lockhart, Smithville. Somewhere 20 minutes outside of Austin, where you're a little just far away enough to like kind of escape what is becoming a big city feel. But still close enough to like be able to have
it's amazing what health and wellness has become. It's become such a luxury. It's become something that I center my day around. I live in Los Angeles now, and I just think about all the things I do today that I didn't do 10 years ago. And I think that's a different part of hospitality outreach that is equally as important as enjoying beautiful crafted cocktails and sophisticated food dishes with people.
Yeah, I think that's an important thing to say. I do believe, and I mean, I'm sure you would all agree with me. I mean, health is the new luxury. Right? Yeah. It's not chasing the most indulgent thing that is typically the indulgence is health rather, and it's not what it used to be, and it's not. The good times are now 6 a.m. beach yoga, right? It's not 4 a.m. bar crawl.
I was making fun of this guy. I was saying these ultra runners, these marathon runners are the new rock stars. And at a time, chefs used to be the rock stars, and they still are rock stars.
Because we all run ultra marathons now.
But he's always been a trendsetter, whether it's skateboarding or being a chef. He's an artist, and it's amazing to watch true artists create and center themselves around new mediums to reinvent or to reinvigorate and ignite their passions.
Well, I think I wanted to say this earlier when we were talking about kind of the forward thinking of Garage. 8 years ago, Garage had a section on the menu called Unleaded, which was a really clever name.
Sans alcohol.
And it was 4 cocktails that didn't have alcohol. Today, if you go into a restaurant that does not have a non-alcoholic place on its menu, and I'm talking today, I'm talking like the last year. Yeah. Right. And you don't see that, you're like, well, this restaurant's so behind the times. 8 years ago, Garage was doing that.
I think we probably sold one non-alcoholic drink a year, but you know what?
I'm pretty sure when I was pregnant, I probably ordered one of those. So,
it's interesting because so many restaurants now are putting that time and effort into creating a really inclusive space. So that includes creating beverage programs for people who are not drinking for whatever reason that may be, right? Because no longer are people abstaining from alcohol that are alcoholics.
Right.
People are abstaining from alcohol for all sorts of reasons.
Yeah.
And what's funny is we know this philosophically. We know that this is happening. We know this as a society. People are drinking less, but we're also seeing it in the numbers. So you're actually behind the business times if you're not creating an alcoholic offering.
Yeah.
But I know as a recovering alcoholic, of only the last 10 years or almost 10 years, when I go into a restaurant, I don't have a non-alcoholic option. And then I want something besides water or Coca-Cola. Yeah. Then I have to be kind of fussed over, and I have to create this whole, I have to throw a wrench in the experience that is happening. And I have to I don't want to do that. Right. So like creating these non-alcoholic options, which Garage did so long ago.
And it's a lot of fun, and they're super tasty. And it's something that I go back to and I'm excited to try. I mean, I'm obsessed with bitter melon right now in LA. I can't get enough. I'm trying to like recreate the gin and tonic. And, there's just so many interesting ways to pair ingredients from a culinary standpoint. Yeah. And I'm glad Philip brought that up, but that was it. We were an early trendsetter for that. We were early to the trend.
Yeah, very early, sure. Even.
Well, and I think you make a good point, because like you said, for whatever reason, but as a consumer, right? If you're at the restaurant, sometimes there is, I feel like, oh, why aren't you drinking?
Absolutely.
Why are you drinking? Or especially,
and then it often is a reflection of someone else, like, well, why am I drinking?
Yeah. There's like a pressure. There's definitely
a discomfort there, right?
When you're just like, I don't really feel like it, but I want something, like you said, other than
it's very word of mouth, and it's become, the interesting thing I think is it's no longer, I remember when I first started, not ordering drinks with alcohol, people would be like, what's wrong with you? Or why aren't you drinking? Right. Or now no one even, bats an eye. It's become so, homogenized, and it's so, it's totally fine for you to go out with a group of friends. I think at the end of the day, we all forget that we're all in the people business. And at the end of the day, we just want to connect, and we want to have conversations, and we want to uplift one another, and we want to have a good time. And you don't need alcohol to do that. And I think that you can go and enjoy alcohol. I think it's an amazing art, and I think it's an amazing business, but I do think that you don't have to be exclusive or inclusive. I think whatever people want to do at the end of the day, I think they're just looking to connect.
Right. No, for sure. And I mean, I will say y'all, the craft cocktails at Garage are just, they're fantastic, whether they have alcohol or not alcohol in it. They're so great. So I guess a big question I'm sure people are going to want to know is, what's next? I mean, do y'all have any little seeds kind of, hustling and bustling of kind of what your next chapter is, or is there anything kind of on the horizon for y'all?
Yeah, I mean, there's always seeds.
Business of seeds.
Right, exactly. The business with the Assembly Hospitality, which is the hospitality group that owns Garage and Comedor and Salvatierra in Costa Rica. We have all sorts of ideas of things we'd like to execute. Always just looking at timing and availability, make sure they really do the right thing. Outside of that, I'm a co-producer in the Field Guide Festival, which actually happens in just a couple days, which is an annual food festival in Austin. And it's really based, again, in that like idea that health is a luxury and the new opulence is organic. And we are a food festival that highlights the local food system. So that is the farms and the chefs both. And we create dishes with the farms and chefs together, and we highlight both the chef and the farmer at the festival. So rather than going like a food and wine festival that you might be familiar with, where you just, it's all about getting as much food and little pieces out as you can, this is like a much more mindful, much more curated experience. And so people, the best chefs in Central Texas and Austin paired with the best food producers in Central Texas and Austin to create food. So we're doing that. That's something that we're always working on and tinkering with. And yeah, I mean,
We've got Hot Luck Festival coming down the pipeline.
Hot Luck is May 25th. It's another great festival that we have multiple events at. It's cool. Hot Luck highlights my pre-shift routine. So on the Saturday of Hot Luck, the entire event starts with Ben's Friends, a run, and a brunch. Open to anybody who's participating in the festival. It's not a guest facing experience, although anybody's welcome if they come.
Right.
And there's all sorts of things. I'm always open to new pathways, new ideas, and I think that's one thing that we can all really share is that we're excited about whatever the future may bring. I mean, maybe a Comedor LA one day, right? Maybe,
yeah.
I always tend to believe that it's very hard to create powerful brands, and powerful brands take decades to create. And so I think there will be a time, and I think that Comedor could be, the Mexican version of Nobu, or it could be as big as Nomo, or whatever we choose to do with it one day. But I do believe too that, my future holds a lot more of this, just helping and building a platform and getting people's stories out there, because I think today's food media or legacy media, that control the narrative, they're missing the forest through the trees, or the trees through the forest, or whatever that saying is. I think that there's just so much to share, and I think people really need a little bit more perspective on what goes into being a chef or being a restaurant operator. It is a full-time job. It's a lot of hard work. There's a lot of pain. There's a lot of suffering, but often on the other side, there's really beautiful moments that happen and can take place.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think it's people like both of you who have created Austin I think it's really changed the dynamic of Austin and people wanting to live here because of the lifestyle and the culture. But people want to be in a town or even close to a town, right? Not even necessarily in the center of Austin, but even on the outskirts, to a town that has places like a Comedor. You know what I mean? They want to be around places where they can get very unique experience.
You want to run and brunch.
Exactly.
You want to run out your back door. You want to get on the
Yeah.
hike and bike trail. We were so lucky and fortunate to grow up with green belts and Barton Springs and Deep Eddy, all these things that growing up here we didn't necessarily maybe take full advantage of,
Right.
but now in our older years, I think it's a really, really special and unique place in the heart of Texas, deep in the heart of Texas, and I'm very proud to be from here.
Yeah, no, it's great. And I'm so grateful that you guys took the time to talk to us. And it's been a pleasure, Philip, talking to you and hearing kind of how, Comedor kind of came to life with, clearly you had a lot of input and help, but, I know Bron has spoken so highly of you, and I think your accolades kind of speak for itself. So it is a pleasure to speak with you today.
Yeah, you as well.
Thank you. And Bron, same with you. Thank you. And I'm excited to see what you do with Bron Appetit. I don't know. I'm like, you got any little hidden gems you want to tell people to go eat at? No.
There's so many. I mean, I think, and then Philip probably knows way more than I do, but there's just a couple stories here in Austin that I think are just so cool. One is a buddy that I grew up with, Jeff Ellis. He started a barbecue restaurant. You want to tell them a little bit more about Jeff Ellis's barbecue?
Oh, Mom Foods is excellent. He started several years ago, just kind of doing pop-ups and farmers markets. He opened a brick and mortar a little over a year ago on the east side. It's over at Manor and Pecan Springs area, doing kind of like a barbecue spot meets Jewish deli. It's really amazing.
Wow.
Not only is the food incredible, but the space feels really awesome. They just got a lot of national recognition, including semifinalist for a James Beard nomination, as well as one of the best new restaurants in the country by USA Today. And all that happened just over the last couple months. And this is somebody else who just like took what he chose to be his craft and honed it and just kept working on it till it got better and better and better and better, and is now getting a lot of national recognition for it. But that is a great one.
There are so
for
many,
sure.
and I mean, I'm always promoting on Instagram or on Twitter, and happy to always connect with people. I love connecting people. I love helping people. If anyone ever needs anything in Los Angeles or is interested in learning more about what we do here in Austin, I'm always available through social.
Awesome. Philip, Bron, thank you again. This was such a pleasure. And I'm so excited for y'all. Happy 5-year anniversary.
Thank you so
Comedor
much.
and 10-year to Garage. I think people are going to probably keep their ear to the ground because they probably want to see what you two guys have up your sleeve in the next couple of years.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
it'll be exciting. Well, thank you guys. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.